Good evening, everyone. Welcome to C Conversations. And as you all know, that C Conversations is a part of the C City initiative of the School of Environment and Architecture, and uh, we have been conducting this year-long series called Architectural Practice in India: A Millennial Archaeology. Over the last 1 year, this is the second semester where we are continuing, and we have already done about 9 talks where we have looked at various kinds of distinct practices that have occurred in architectural space over the last millennium. Sorry, over the since the millennium in India, and these practices include various kinds of shifts, such as the turn towards large corporate practices, specific directions in heritage, conservation, environment, sustainability, special artisanal practices, and so on. Today, we are going to actually look at one more such distinct practice which has emerged over the last 20 years, which has also kind of been very intertwined in the way the city has emerged, and especially in the sense of the way in which disparities have increased in social space as well as the space that we inhabit in urban spaces. And today we are going to therefore focus on communitarian and activist practices through which architects and architectural practices voice their concerns around the ideas of spatial justice. Now, the decentralization of governance and liberalization of state policies during the 1990s opened the development sector to a wider range of actors and practices. While the private developers and the real estate sector came to dominate the shaping of the built environment, this period also saw the proliferation of non governmental organizations, resident associations, urban think tanks, advocacy groups, and also citizen based organizations. And through collaboration with the state and non state actors, these groups address local civic issues such as waste management, encroachment, lack of public spaces, and neighborhood beautification, as well as city scale concerns, including homelessness, slum demolitions and displacement, ideas in gender and space, and contestations around the development policies and urban futures. The practices that emerged range from activism and community engagement to journalism, public interest litigation, alternate plans and development mechanisms, and policy advocacy. So, this panel examines the changing nature of architectural practice by bringing together practitioners who have located themselves meaningfully in this shift, foregrounding the questions of equality, of access, and justice in urban space. Um, and they also explore how dialogue between architecture and activism and community has reshaped professional roles and modes of engagement for architects. By asking why this communitarian turn has intensified over the last 2 decades and what political possibilities and tension it carries, this discussion will consider how new imaginaries of difference, belonging, and participation in the making of built environment can take place. It reflects on how contemporary practitioners engage critically with notions of community to reshape more responsive, ethical, and socially grounded architectural futures. To discuss this, we have two very interesting and sharp practices. We have Neera Adarkar, who is also the chairperson of our very school, but this is an opportunity for us to really understand, how she has come to kind of engage with urban issues so closely over her, long career. And we also have with us Shweta Wagh and Hussain Indorwala, who have co-founded the Collective for Spatial Alternatives, and they've been kind of very active in the space of engaging with public and raising concerns around city space and its use. So now today's conversation will be moderated by Prasad Khanolkar. But before inviting our discussants to present, I'll like to give a small introduction to both of these groups. Neera Adarkar is a practicing architect and urbanist based in Mumbai, a graduate from Sir J. J. College of Architecture, Mumbai University, and a postgraduate in industrial design from IIT Mumbai. Neera has been awarded an honorary doctorate by the Department of Urban Planning, Urbanism, and Architecture of the Katholieke University in Belgium. She is also a recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Award from IIT Bombay in 2013. Neera is running a joint practice under Adarkar Associates engaged in architecture, planning, conservation, and urban research. Adarkar Associates has designed several private and public projects in and out of Mumbai. Neera's work specially emerges from deep concern of social, urban, and gender issues involved, and she has been involved in many urban issues and actively participated in the struggle for textile mill lands of Mumbai. Some of which I'm hoping that Neera will open up today in her talk. She has also been an active participant in the women's movement over the last 3 decades. She has been a member of the government-appointed Committee of Experts for Dharavi Redevelopment and ex-member of Board of Studies Architecture in Goa University. She has co-authored with Meena Menon 100 years, 100 voices, oral history of mill workers in Girangaon, which came out in 2004, and also edited an anthology called The Chawls of Mumbai, Galleries of Life, which was a book that came out in 2011. She has also contributed essays to many publications and has delivered lectures at universities and conferences in India and outside. So we are very eager to learn from your experience, Neera. And our second group collective for spatial alternatives is a collective of urban researchers, academics, professionals, and community organizers engaged in spatial and environmental research and planning in Mumbai. The collective works with communities to develop alternatives to conventional slum clearance, redevelopment, and urban renewal programs supporting residents in shaping and influencing the environments in which they live. CSA also collaborates with progressive organizations and civil society groups to contribute to public policy decisions and strengthen participatory planning processes. Central to its work is the belief that planning plays a key role in the distribution of resources and opportunities within cities. CSA aligns itself with progressive planning tradition that seeks to create conditions for collective agency and to work toward a more equal, democratic, and sustainable urban society. CSA was co-founded by Shweta Wagh and Hussain Indorwala, who are both here with us today, along with Sagarika Suri. Shweta is an urban conservationist and associate professor at the Kamla Raija Vidyanidhi Institute for Architecture and Environmental Studies, and she's currently pursuing a PhD in sociology at the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay. And Hussain is involved in several social movements in Mumbai and is the convener of Amchi Mumbai, Amchi Best, a citizens forum advocating for reliable, affordable public transport. And many of you may have come across a lot of their activist articles across various platforms in very prominent media. So we are very happy to have both of all three of you here. And with that, and without taking much time, I would like to invite Neera to give her presentation. So Neera.
Where do we want? Huh. So today is 6th March, and day after tomorrow is 8th March, which is the International Women's Day. So I want to wish you all a great International Women's Day. And so I thought maybe I'll begin with my engagement in the feminist movement just for a while, and then we can proceed. So it was actually 33 years ago in 1999, and I'll focus mainly on the women architects. So women architects had met in Mumbai, and that was a small group, about 5 to 6 people, but somebody had come from Chandigarh also. And then we shared our lives, our concerns, and and personal is political was the slogan that time. So we can also converted into personal is also professional. And there was some kind of, but immediately after, I think after a few months, we had a much larger conference in Ahmedabad, and a lot of senior and younger women practitioners were also there. Interestingly, that happens in most of the women's conferences. That's the inhibitions kind of get dissolved, and there were questions from the younger architects to the senior architects as how they manage their husbands and how they actually manage the ego issues of their husband, and especially when there are architect husbands and non-architect husbands as well. So around that time, I was already part of the feminist movement, and there were researches and visiting the several other fields by women architects, but somehow I kept myself for a while away from my profession, although I was working also, I was teaching also. And how I actually got into the movement is, if you all know or remember the case of Mathura. Mathura case was where this young girl of 15, 17 years old was raped in the police station, and this happened in Vidarbha, I think near Nagpur. And there were, she was detained till night, and then she was raped and so on. And the two policemen who did it were jailed for a while. But after a couple of years, they were acquitted because it went to the higher court, and the higher court said that, well, she did not resist. Her hymen was already split. I don't know how they find out, but this kind of a ridiculous this thing. And that is when so many women came out on the road, various different organizations. Now, there were organizations which belonged to the left parties, socialist parties and communist parties, who had their own, group of women, but somehow they were not immediately coming out because the thinking in these left parties was that, well, women's issues are not the basic ones. They are not basic. They are like, superstructure, or they're cultural issues. But the women who were already in that, in the party wanted to have a separate, although they didn't leave the party, but they were, separately working out their own positions. Also, there were autonomous groups who didn't belong to any party as such, but all of them, and they got charged after this Mathura case. There was a huge morcha. Sorry, I don't have the photos, but there was a huge morcha at Fountain, and I was just walking on the pavement, and then I see Pushpa Bhave, Professor Pushpa Bhave, who was one of our trustees. She's no more, and she says, "Hey, come up on the truck." And that's how I joined the movement, actually, then I joined the Forum Against Oppression of Women and so on. So these were two autonomous women's groups, and there were these party-affiliated women groups. But there were multiple articulations of gender consciousness emerged in these movements. And along with the activism of protest marches, etc., there was also a significant growth in scholarships and working new research concepts in the universities, especially SNDT, and not so much in Bombay University, but SNDT was very, very active on that time, leading to women's studies and gender studies. So new concepts were emerging from these studies in the discipline of social sciences, humanities, history, law, and the understanding arose because of the feminist mainly understanding that nothing is, or mainly believing that nothing is value neutral, because there is always a participant's view. Now, till this phase, I really believe that my profession, architecture, was quite neutral. I mean, why would architects create bad spaces for women? And there was a time when I needed to, but then there came a time when I needed to look at the architecture profession or even practice with a critical lens. So there were like the theory conceptualization mainly happened in these universities, and there were agitational actions on the ground. But of course, it was give and take. So and then the next Women's Day, somehow Pradnya, thanks to Akhtar Chauhan, Pradnya and Madhvi and I were invited by Institute of Architects to talk there. And we were quite thrilled. We talked about whatever we wanted to talk. And no, I have to go forward. Yeah, yeah. So if you see it in the center, there is a model kept. This model was brought by them from somewhere to convey the planning and design by some architect who had done this. And it wasn't easy to absorb for them. So what we did was we had this kind of workshops with them, which were, that didn't make any sense to them. But then exploring the body space relationship in the domestic space, so they recreated their, what is it? Yeah. So this workshop led them to articulate their housing needs, and then of course that didn't go further, and it was left like that. But we did couple of workshops like this. And then we had this women architects group, and I was also teaching in the college. So somehow we used to come together, and then this was a list of things which we thought that any housing cluster or any housing project should have. Is now all of us are very familiar to it, but then it was like a big effort. So we asked for a common workplace in the home-based work in the settlement, or creche or childcare, then safe and free toilets with adequate street lighting, shelter homes for distressed women, emergency and temporary shelter homes, affordability or affordable safe housing, and accessibility to toilets, etc. And later, this foundation would help us in, in the making a development plan for the city, because some of us participate. I think Shweta was also there. We participated in the group to advise the planners on planning that or creating the development plan. Not that it helped much. So then I'll share the project we did after that was mass housing for Nagari Nivara Parishad. This mass housing scheme was 6,000 houses. Yeah, it was 6,000 houses of low-income families. Then there were street vendors and so on. So Mrunal Gore was the main person, and Baburao Samant, and she worked with the street vendors, and therefore this housing was not free. They contributed their share, and that entire collection was very well looked after by this trust. But like Mrunal Gore was an activist and feminist. On the other hand, Babura Samant was only focused on completing the project on time and delivering the houses. So very often when we wanted, and of course Shirish Patel was there as the structural engineer and the planner. So we tried to push all these amenities inside, and actually they were created. I mean, there was so they did give us the opportunity to suggest specific requirements which had emerged from our work with the women earlier on the issue of gender and housing. So and there was a decline of employment in the formal sector, increase of employment in the informal sector, and since that category was Mrunal Gore's constituency, she was very willing to incorporate the suggestions which you are giving them. And so here you see they are on the fast. It's gone. Okay. Anyway, so there were three of them. You can see here Ahilya Rangnekar, she's a Marxist leader. Pramila Dandavate happens to be wife of Madhu Dandavate, but in her own right, she was a socialist leader, and Mrunal Gore. And this is the story of a very marathon agitation that was launched in the city of Mumbai for getting the land from the government for constructing houses at an affordable cost to the economically weaker section, so that they don't have to again migrate back to the slums, and they got this land under the Urban Sealing Act. And of course, they required a lot of efforts, and because they were very staunch activists, finally they got the land. So all this took nearly 10 hours before the construction would start. So he didn't want to take any chance. So the whole hillock was, flattened. I mean, that decision even Shirish Patel agreed to. And then there were these clusters made. And because there was earlier something done, he didn't want to deviate from a very structured kind of, very uniform structured layout. So because we could have, created spaces within these clusters also. And this is begin with. But now we'll see the photograph how they are being transformed. And this is the cluster just ground plus 3. We wanted to remove at least one block from each cluster to give the openness. But yes, I want to tell you the very important thing that each cluster had a creche. Then they were all pedestrian pathways. The women and children could walk up to the market through the pedestrian pathways. They didn't have to cross any. So there were separate roads for rickshaws, separate roads for the cars also. There were no cars. And ample parking was given for the cycles. That's one. Now it's become upper middle class, I think. Very upper middle class. Okay. So and this had to be finished at the military cooking and very military rigidity kind of thing. So someone wanted complete uniformity and no variations at all. But it has now become, yes, thanks to now again all this list of amenities were provided that I don't for today. But there are school, markets, women's center, for separate women's centers for women to come together, and there was center for the women in crisis. Then very safe kind of workplaces and vocational training center. Of course, medical facilities were there. This is how it looks, and this is how the in between we created the bridges in between. For more communication and for more interaction, and these spaces are used very creatively. So I'll come to the story of the textile mills. How much time? So this is the textile mill agitation, and some people will know it thoroughly and some may not at all. How do I do? Okay, so there is the textile mills were closing down, and there were 58 textile mills and there were 600 acres. The total working class neighborhood was about the entire neighborhood hectares, and the mills were closing down. Finally, they closed down. And this is a very interesting neighborhood because there are main railway lines and main road network here. There are lots of green open spaces here, because there are lots of maidans and the shores and But this kind of a very rich infrastructure was handed over to the builders through the this is the mill. This was the industrial core of the city, and so the growth of the city is based on the industrial foundation, which was the mills came up in 1860s. This is now most of it will be going. That's why I'm putting the slides to on. And there was a time when nearly 100,000 workers were employed in the textile mills, and out of which 20,000 were women. The two-thirds of city's labor was employed in the textile industry, and strength for the workers in the 58 mills were nearly 250,000 at that time. And this community evolved institutions, associations, and fought great political battles. They were, so they were very left parties were very they controlled the union, and they also looked at the entire neighborhood in a very creative manner. So they were entertained, educated. They entertained with the city with their music, their plays, and so on. And they also influenced the politics and the economy and culture of the city. So. So there was an agitation. You can see this. This is a photo which is old photo, but you can see the number of women there because really there were 30% women in working in the textile industry, and it was possible because they were in the neighborhood where the jobs. I'm sure you now know what jobs are and how conducive they are for community living. So that's the reason why so many women could come out and actually work in the mills, and they can become because there were strikes, very well-known strikes. This is a photo where the mills are now changing. This is Phoenix mill, which is now changed, and then you can see the workers. Sorry, this is got stretched, but the workers are. They decided that they will bring out the chaddi mocha. So you can see all of them are in the chaddis. And then came the government proposal. I'm skipping many stages, but then came the government proposal whereby I think it was that time Charles also state proposal that the city will be divided, the entire land. I mean, he was very sitting not as individual means, but entire neighborhood, and that will be divided into three parts: 33% for city amenities, 33% for mill owners, and 33% for the public housing. This was of course opposed by the workers because they just couldn't imagine that the mills would be closed. But that was reality. And when he proposed this, it was, and meanwhile, there was this rule was also made more stringent. They said now under the pressure of the owners, developers, next you will find that 1/3 now has become 1/8 or something, and so the public housing component is reduced, and the city amenity component is reduced, and the mill owner land share is increased a lot. So 1/3 was formula was applied. This was discussed with the workers, and we had a separate workshop, and they were very annoyed. But at least they decided that they would want their where is it going? Oh, sorry. Not going back. More. So according to the new rule, the component for worker housing and the green open spaces for the for the city reduced to 10% and 12% instead of 33% and 33%. And then there was there was a resistance from the city groups as well. And we used to have our meetings in Rachna Samstar. I think you came there as students, or you. So I think they were also involved with Charles Korea, and this whole proposal was done in their Korea office. He was very happy that he was giving justice to the workers. But even this was denied by the government. And that is the time when, of course, it was discussed with the workers also. And going back. Yeah, and this then we had discussions with the workers. We had separate workshop with the workers, explain the scheme to them, and there, like given the reality, they demanded a share in housing and also sharing in the uh, economic activity, in the sense that they wanted small industries or something to create their jobs for them, and that is the demand, which was of course agreed upon. Interestingly, that time Charles Korea was in touch with us, and he had read my book 100 Years, 100 Voices, and he really was. I mean, he thought that he was doing justice, and then he um, uh, he donated all those panels, the panels which were made, big panels which I showed you. There were big panels made, and we displayed them in Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata was supposed to be demolished. It's still there. But this is what happened, and when the workers came, and then we explained what the scheme was, and then the architects brought I mean, not nothing, but there was some interventions from our side. And then this case was taken to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court completely gave the verdict for the mill owners, in the sense that they were that there was almost no share for the workers. And as we saw that diagram where it is reduced to just 10% and 12% instead of 33%. And then there was this rainbow coalition of people who came out in the Maidan. Charles Korea came, Sham Benegal was there, Jason Vikuna was there. So all these people who otherwise wouldn't see the Azad Maidan, they were there for protest. But of course nothing worked out, and Charles Korea also was very disappointed with all these developments. And so you can see this but the workers did not give up. I was sort of discussions with the union leaders, and they said that it's okay, whatever we have got, we have to move ahead. There is a limit to how much we can fight, and when you know that it's going to be invaded, we have to take a step ahead. And these are people are demanding the housing, and the housing, even on that 1/3 plot, has come up. Sorry, but you must have seen the Mara housing, which is and they are built for the workers. Okay, now I will quickly show our projects which kind of respond to whatever only those projects are responding to our work outside the office. So we did the UA Center for we did this UA Center for UA, and which is It has a interdisciplinary nature of activities. The building is structured to create a kind of open space, and it challenges the norm of, because it has an interaction human rights dwellings. It has people who are coming from the pavements and slums. So there's no division in that. Um, okay. Sorry, this building, this slide was earlier. These are the workers' housing which are built on the Bhada land, and they are moving there. This is Yuva. It has a landscape courtyard and paved plaza, which is all transparent. People can go from here. There is no segregation of class here. Um, this is also Yuva, and then there is a project which is SM Joshi Socialist Foundation, which is also a cultural center, and this is in Pune, and you can see this. It's very actively now. It's a very kind of a living center now. There are so many activities happening all the time. Lastly, I'm sorry, this is a senior citizen home which we have done at Jamulpada. So these are community for community. These are the books which we produced, and this is expression. Expression was a big event organized by Majlis, and that's where we had a small competition of the students where it is a passing Maidan at Jogeshwari, which had come under attack during Radharai Chand riots. And the competition for the student was to create something. That Uttam Jain had invited him for as a jury, and I mean that was one of the interesting activities. Then there was gender in the DP. We were part of. We were also part of that group, and whatever we our so it's a lifetime expectations we poured out to the commissioner there. That's all. I think I'll stop here. And
Thank you, Neera, and thank you so much for generously sharing kind of work. And I understand that this is slightly, not fair to give you such little time to talk about so much work. But hopefully, we'll open some more episodes in the conversation with Shweta. I'll now invite both Hussein and Shweta to, share their thoughts.
Hi, thank you for inviting us. It was great to be on the panel with Meera. Of course, for people like us, for the work that Meera and others have done has been an inspiration. So, maybe a little of what they managed to achieve, but we consider it as success. But anyway, we started this, CSA somewhere in 2017 or 18. And the first question that we have, we doing a lot of things in the city, part of the development plan describing the ground score, housing, all kinds of other things. And we thought that we should a lot of this work continually. We should be some academic level, because a lot of work was very 1 week here and 1 week there, it was kind of scattered. So we thought of giving it some kind of framework. And that's how it started in the thought. But then the question is, if you want to start a group like this, what kind of form do you use? Like, do you set up an NGO? Or do you try to make some kind of a informal collective? Should you think about it as a for-profit consultancy? And so these were the kind of questions we were trying to think about. And we always had a little bit of a critical view of NGOs because you have there are funders, you have to attract funding, and then once you have the funding, your projects are subject to the parameters of that funding. So we don't want to get into all that. So what we did was the three of us, we registered a partnership firm. And we said, okay, so this is the partnership firm. At least there is some kind of a legal presence. So you have a bank account and a partnership firm on paper and so on. And then we continue doing what we were doing. So it's not like we changed anything. The entity just says on paper, if you want to make a living out of this kind of work, don't do it. It's not a for-profit. It's not a not-for-profit. It's for law. There's no idea. The only reason we can continue doing this under this umbrella is because we have jobs which give us some kind of a salary and so it works. Most of the work that we do under CSA is pro bono. So as a business model, it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, so that is essentially the preface to this. So when we, one of the things that was there in the brief for this session was the word activism. And usually activism comes with a lot of baggage. When we think activists, we think people who are working with poor communities, who are filing PILs or doing protests or andolans and so on. But it's important to make very clear at the outset that activists are not only people who work for the poor. Activism is a particular kind of activity. And for instance, in Mumbai, great example. There are organizations like you must have heard City Space, the NGO, or Agni, Bombing First. These are non-governmental organizations. They are activists, but they work for a very different public. For City Space and Agni, it is usually the middle class, mainly. For Bombing First, it is the corporate community that they represent. So they are activists as well. You have a very well-known figure who talk about a particular point of view of how planning should be done. Like for instance, say Vimal Patel. He's an activist because he advocates for a certain way of doing things, right? So one should not assume that activists are a particular kind of people who work for the poor. Activists are people who have a particular view of how things should be, and they advance that view. They try to put that into effect, right? So, of course, it depends who you are and what kind of a point of view or a perspective or a community that you at least claim to represent. Advocacy, of course, goes very close to that. So, some of the, like Anuj mentioned at the beginning, that there is there's a question of spatial justice. So, spatial justice activists advocate for a certain redistribution. So, Neera's work, let's say, on Agni Nevada was a perfect example of redistribution. How do you get land from the state and then use that land to house working people? That was what they managed to achieve, and based on their advocacy, right? Community, this is another word which comes with a lot of baggage. When we think about community, we think about the fisher folk or the hawkers or these kind of typically marginalized people. But again, depends on if for an organization like Agni, the community is middle class property owners, and so the community can change. The best way to understand the community is a group of people who have a particular interest. So it's an individual. Now, for different things, you can have different groups of people with, for instance, there are certain things for which the whole city has a name. That is your community. There are certain things for which only a very specific group of people, like let's say, if there's an eviction of street vendors, the community in that case will be the people who of that street and so on. So, community also, one should not think that community means only marginalized people, right? NGOs, of course, we discussed that, and research. Well, at least CSA, a lot of work that we do is research work, but it's not academic research, which is so we make a distinction there. There are two kinds of research. There's research where you talk about the relationships between facts, how to connect them, in terms of how to understand things when the facts are known. But there is one kind of research which is called action research, where much of the work has to do with discovering things, concrete facts on the ground. So that is what is generally called action research, and a lot of work that CSA does is action research. We are also academics, so we do academic research, and usually outside the work that we are doing as CSA. So a lot of the work that we show you is about going on the ground, finding out what is going on, documenting it, putting it in the form of a report, maybe submitting it in court, maybe submitting it to the government, and so on. Right? So these are literally fact-finding kind of research. So the first, we'll go a little quickly in if there are questions about any specific project, then maybe during the discussion we can take it up. So this was in 2019. There was a group of the disability group who had gone to the Bombay High Court with a writ petition saying that some of the railway stations in Bombay are not complying with the guidelines of the universal access, government guidelines. So what the High Court asked the lawyers of the petitioners to find their own experts and do it. Now they asked us, so we put together a team and we did this. Luckily, the High Court had given a model saying that we do it in 30 days, and they had also asked the railways to comply, which is why we got access. Otherwise, the railways would never let people like you go and start measuring the railway stations. So we got that access, we got a timeline, and that's we put together this study. So the basic point of the study, very simple, it was to look at the guidelines of the universal access guidelines of the government of India, and then check all of the stations to see how much they're complying with those laws. And so what we did is we set up a methodology. These are all Mumbai stations. So we surveyed all the suburban railway stations. Harbour, Central and Western. So we set up a methodology. There are guidelines for spaces, there are guidelines for features. Features would be things like your platform heights, so on. Spaces would be your ticketing areas, platform areas, overhead bridges, and so on. And then for each of these, we had a team of 3 or 4 people who go on to each station, and there were questions for each of those items, and they would fill up their forms. And we would get we started getting data for all of the stations. We had made these kind of diagrams for each railway station, basically showed the platforms, the bridges, the toilets and entry, etc., etc. And so for each station, we had a kind of a chart like this, which showed you how much it is complying with the guidelines. So the other is a relatively good one. You can see that radar has more area, so it complies with a few things more or less. But if you take another station like Umbroli, which is doing pretty bad, generally we also found that the western stations do better than the central and harbour. The island stations do better than the suburban stations, and the suburbs do better than the further south. And then we had a kind of presentation of the data. This data was then submitted in court, and then the court basically said, okay, the compliance that we found was only 39.4% compliance with the guidelines. So the court saw the number, which is very important. One number is changing everything. The court said, ordinary railways to implement all our recommendations. Of course, the railways did not do any of it. And then 6 months later, we went to the railways to do this presentation again, and they said, oh no, we have space constraints, we can't fit it on here. We keep the lift locked because otherwise we could misuse it and so on. So they found lots of reasons to not comply with the code order. Anyway, so this was the study. The study is there online. You can download it, you can access it. Okay.
So this was in 2018, end of 2018, when the reclamation for the coastal road began. And at the time, I mean, there was some discussion about the coastal road. There was some independent people's tribunal, which we had also convened a few years back. But this is when the work actually began, and they realized that Burley Fishing Village, like the reclamation had started, the Burley fishers actually protested in this, and we realized that there was no study done of the fishing activity. PMC was denying that there was any fishing activity. Yes. So at that time, we did a survey of the Burley fishing zone, which extends all the way from Banganga till Mount Mary and Bandra, and up to a certain depth in the sea. And we documented the artisanal fishing practices of the Burley fishers, which the BMC is supposed to do a baseline survey of the ecosystem and fishing activity. They had not done the 1 year long surveys. They had approached CMFRI, but they wanted to start the work, therefore they had not done a study, and they were denying that there was any fishing there. So this is the area. So the Wadi fishing zone begins at Balganga, goes on all the way up north up to Mount Perry, and the part where the coastal road was to be built, the reclamation for the coastal road was actually the intertidal zone. And BMC also kept denying that there is any fishing activity that happens in the near shore area. They said that there are no boats observed there. They also denied any fishing activity in the intertidal zone. That's when we started documenting these fishing practices. And so this is the subtidal fishing in the Vati fishing area. And this is the intertidal zone at Hajeli. Today it's a mess. It's almost all reclaimed. Next. And we documented various kinds of fishing practices in the intertidal zone. So when this data was presented, again the worthy fishers earlier tried to approach the government authorities to get the government to kind of stop the reclamation. However, the politicians or the government authorities did not respond. That's when they filed a writ petition in January. There were I think 5 writ petitions which were finally heard. But the fishers, PIS eventually filed, but the fishers were the first to go to court in January. And the High Court initially was just like the BMC just kept denying that there was any fishing activity. And when the fishers produced evidence of this report was tendered in court, and when this evidence was presented, BMC said that they had got fish from elsewhere and they had planted it there on the coast. And so it was like, BMC used to come with a whole bunch of lawyers in court and try to contest what the fishers were claiming. Eventually, they tried to claim that there's no fishing on the rocky area, which is the intertidal area. And that's when we showed that there were at least 16 different practices, intertidal fishing practices in the rocky area, which was being reclaimed. And eventually, the High Court said that how could the coastal work proceed, the reclamation work proceed without a fishing zone survey, and they stayed the work. CMFRI was brought in to do a survey, and they did a rapid appraisal. And the CMFRI report also basically reported that there is intertidal fishing. The rocky area was actually a nursery. BMC was saying that that's a wasteland, and the BMC did not claim that it had any ecological value. Eventually, it went to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court then allowed the work to start again. There were 5 PIs that were filed in the High Court, and we actually won the PI. We won in court. It quashed the CRZ clearance. It also said that they should get an environmental clearance and conduct a public hearing, which mandates a public hearing. However, the contractors in the BMC went to the Supreme Court again, and they allowed the reclamation work to continue. So this is, I won't get into the whole story, but these are some of the photographs of intertidal area, the rocky shore, which was used to harvest. Women fishers used to harvest oysters from the rocky area. Today, much of the area is completely reclaimed, and they're planning to, architects of the world. That area. Sorry, the environment was very confusing.
One thing I don't think there was any conference. We didn't see. The thing is, we were when we for Shirish Patel, and so he was this Nagari also, but I knew Korea very well. But he approached us to work for Enron. Hospital. Training. Technical training. And he offered to be job. And we had no hesitation in saying we will do this. They tried to convince us that we said that, but we are doing good for the people. That sense, and we have lost with each other large practices. So many other people say, soon. I mean, especially in the architecture classrooms and when we are designing faculty, it's not very difficult to know.
Looking at the navigation routes, for instance, the whole question of geomorphology and understanding bathymetry and how the boats navigate, and these are not really architectural questions, but there is this kind of infrastructure that is being designed, and how is that disrupting access for the community? And there are certain skills that you have that we can do